He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
After the Tokyo Olympics happened and I hadn't gone, we did a big review with my team. We said, look, what's going on? Can we fix this? You know, is this irreparable? Do I need to just stop? Or is this something I can probably come back from?
Hi, I'm Jesse Mulligan, and this is Sports History NZ. This time I'm talking to an athlete who reached the top of her sport, fell back to the bottom, and has made the brave decision to begin the climb back up again. Eliza McCartney first picked up a pole vault at the age of 13. Just 6 years later, she won an Olympic medal, the youngest woman in the history of the sport to do so. An injury kept her out of the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. When I talked to her in September 2023, she had rebuilt and reimagined her entire technique, and she still didn't know whether she'd ever return to the top. I told her we missed her at the Tokyo Olympics, but not as much as she must have missed being there.
Well, yes, that is true, but it's amazing. People keep saying that to me. They're just so stoked to see that I'm jumping again, and it's amazing to have that sort of support in your home country.
Can you tell me a bit about, so we'll do the start of your career in a moment, but tell me how you ended up not being there and give us a bit of a lowdown on the injury if you can.
Oh, such a long story.
Yeah, that's okay. It's RNZ. We have all the time in the world.
Well, I guess to take you right back to the beginning, in 2016 at the Rio Olympics, just like a couple weeks out from that, I'd started developing Achilles pain. And that was the very first time I'd had Achilles pain. But it was right before the Olympics. I'd had, all my training had been done essentially, and we were able to manage it, and I was able to compete without feeling it. So that was great, obviously. But every year since then, it just got a bit worse. And to the point where I was missing competitions. I'd then start getting hamstring issues that seemed kind of related, both hamstrings, some nerve pain, but always kind of hamstrings and Achilles. And every year it kind of just was getting worse and worse and worse until we hit about 2020. And I was like, oh God, this is this is bad. I wasn't able to train properly. I couldn't walk some days because I'd get this really big, kind of immune reaction going on with what we think was happening. Where I'd have tissue swelling up all around my ankle, not related to the Achilles. There was a whole lot of really funky stuff going on, which led us to think there might be a bit of an autoimmune component as well, which was hard to take when you're a professional athlete.
Yeah. And my physio says to me, obviously not quite as elite an athlete as you, Eliza, but that if you have a problem in one part, the whole of your body reacts to make up for it, and so sometimes you can get random things happening in different places.
Oh, yeah. One of the things I think that ended up happening with me is I just stopped kind of using my right glute, and so it's my right Achilles that I had most of the trouble with. And I wonder, if that probably came on after getting a sore Achilles. I kind of stopped using it as much and had a bit of wastage even just because of limping over time and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So for sure, it certainly affects your whole body. And just to skip forward a little bit, last year I kind of changed everything to try and sort these issues out. And the first thing I did was learn how to walk again. Not in the sense that I couldn't walk at the time. I was healthy enough to do that. But walking using all the right muscles,
Tell me about that.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So essentially after the Tokyo Olympics happened and I hadn't gone, we did a big review with my team. We said, look, what's going on? Can we fix this? Is this irreparable? Do I need to just stop? Or is this something I can probably come back from? And what was really cool was that the kind of overwhelming thought was, no, actually, there's things we haven't tried. We can definitely try this again.
Yeah.
And so I was like, right, well, I'm keen. I'm going to do it. Off we go. And one of the changes we made is I had an S&C, essentially, strength and conditioning coach come in and take over my gym work, my running work, essentially everything I do except pole vaulting. And they became my biomechanical specialist. And so that's where we started right from the beginning. And we started with walking. And, a lot of it's posture. A lot of people, God, I'm terrible as well when I sit here. My shoulders hunch, right? So
it's a big problem for a lot of us.
Yeah, right. So
particularly, I think when you were tall as a teenager too, you kind of hunch down to fit in with everyone else. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So is he just looking at you walk, or is he putting you through some sort of machine scan high-tech thing?
No, he's got the eye for it.
Right.
So no, it's something that he's done for a long time. Matt Dello, so he's part of my team now.
Yeah.
And
so you're going to reverse what you've been doing for how long? 20 odd years.
not quite 20, but walking for sure.
Yeah.
But even then, that was like what last year I would have been vaulting for 11 or 12 years by that stage. It's a long time, since I was a teenager, as you were just saying. Those are ingrained habits. So not just walking, jogging, running, the way I lift in the gym, like everything. Obviously I do it my own way. And so we worked on everything, absolutely everything, because it's a whole body approach, right? Just because your hamstring or your Achilles hurts, you can't always just focus in on that area because, as you just said, everything's connected.
Yeah.
so we certainly went through everything, and it was a long process.
Was there a moment where he said to you, this is what it's going to take, are you up for it?
Yes, and that was quite a stressful time, I have to say, because I was told it would take at least a year of this without any pole vault. And that's pretty wild for someone who, I used to pole vault 3 times a week. I've done that since I was 13 years old. And being told you're going to have to take a year off actually pole vaulting. And obviously that means competition, it means everything. And this was within a year of the Commonwealth Games. And I was like, nah, can't do that. I need to go to the Commonwealth Games.
Yeah.
I can't possibly give that up. And obviously I did, because I didn't go to the Commonwealth Games and I did this process. But it was a really tough call. And it sounds kind of weird now because I think, well, obviously I needed to do something. I needed to change what I was doing.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to do if I wanted to continue. But still at the time I was like, I can't give up the Commonwealth Games. Like, why would I choose to do that? But in hindsight, of course, that was, the right decision. So,
And so do you start to see this working? Do you start to feel the change?
Absolutely, yeah. I started vaulting again in October, November, I think. Running completely differently. So obviously part of what we had to work on, I was learning how to run with these new biomechanics.
Yeah.
And then I have to then run with a pole with these new biomechanics and then be able to pole vault with that. So that took a bit of learning as well. And I'm still working on that a lot at the moment. My running style has certainly changed quite a lot. And I should say the obvious, that it's to protect the body, make sure I'm using the right muscles, not putting too much tension through tendons and ligaments that aren't designed to handle that sort of force. So that's what we're doing by changing the biomechanics.
Can you put into words what you've changed about your run, for example?
Yes. So in my pole vault run, I used to bound a lot. And I think, you can kind of imagine that. It's quite a floaty movement. You're kind of in the air for quite a long time. And now my steps are a lot shorter. I don't really float. My run-ups have come in like meters, which is pretty crazy because, it's very controlled.
Yeah.
Yeah, pole
You
vault.
would always do the same number of steps before every vault, yeah.
Yeah, so we tend to jump on even numbered run-ups. So you can do 2 steps, 4 steps, 6 steps, all the way up to 20 steps if you want to. So yes, it's always the same number. And it's very precise. My run-up at the moment for 12-step is at 23.6 metres. It might move to 23.65 or 0.7 in the session. So it's very precise. Yeah. So for it to come in a metre or two is actually means that my run-up's changed quite dramatically.
Yeah, it come in that much shorter.
Yeah. I'm just, I've shortened it up and faster. And I'm just so much more efficient on the ground is probably the best way to put it. I'm maintaining the energy that I'm creating. I'm putting it into the pole rather than doing all this bounding, kind of losing energy everywhere and actually not, being as efficient with my run-up.
And so to the Potts Classic event in Hastings. Was that your first time competing? Since
it was.
Everything, yeah.
Yes, since this whole change, and it was wonderful. It was so great. I was on a really short run-up, like a run-up that I would never want to compete off because it's kind of a waste of time.
Yeah.
And when, just for people who don't know pole vault as well, when I'm in a short run-up, I'm really close to the mat. So I'm only doing a few steps, which means I can't jump as high because I can't put as much force into a pole. Yeah. So I didn't jump particularly high at Potts Classic, which I did a couple, 3-4 weeks ago. But I jumped high for that run-up and I was jumping again. That was the number one objective of the competition, was to compete again. And so that's why I decided to do it on a short run-up. I wasn't quite ready to compete off long run-ups yet, but I decided it was better I just get into it because I was so nervous. And it just needed to happen. I just needed to start my competitions again. And now I can work on competing on the longer run-ups again.
You won?
I did. Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise.
That's great.
Because
thanks to you largely, there are a few young women pole vaulting in New Zealand now and doing so pretty well.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy thing to be part of after Rio. We just had an influx of girls wanting to vault, young girls. It was a really crazy thing to be a part of and very cool. And you're right, we have way more female vaulters than males in New Zealand at the moment,
Yeah.
and perhaps that's why. But yeah, we
And
have.
now it's your job to sabotage and undermine them, keep them in their place, right? Having
That's what
inspired them,
us
now it's time to
Kiwi
crush their
athletes-
dreams.
Yeah, we're known for that in New Zealand sport. No, it boosts everybody, because
Yeah.
we're individual athletes. And more than that, we're athletes that every time we stand on the runway to compete, it's us against the bar. We still have to clear that height to get a placing in the competition, to even be in for a medal, right? Doesn't matter what anyone else in the field is doing, you still have to clear that bar. So it's almost different to like a running race where you have to physically
Yeah.
pass someone and beat them.
It's like
For us,
golf
it's
in
very-
a way, right?
Yeah.
You're playing your
Yeah.
own game.
Absolutely. So, having more athletes in New Zealand makes it feel more like a team event, and that's really cool. That's, what you don't often get, obviously, as an individual athlete.
Okay. Take us back then. How did you end up pole vaulting?
I played lots of sports when I was younger. I was one of those kids that would, climb all the fences and trees and just spend my time outdoors. So
Well, what school were you at?
I went to Ponsonby Primary.
Great.
And then I went to Vauxhall Primary, Belmont Intermediate, and then Takapuna Grammar School.
Okay.
Which, I loved. And I have two younger brothers, and, they were up trees as well. So we just spent time outside. So sport was a natural thing for
Yeah.
us. And I was really fortunate to, have grown up in a household where if I wanted to play sport, I could go and do it. And my parents would be able to drive me to it, or, it would be available to me. So when I saw something I liked, I got to do it. And that's, such a cool position to be in.
Totally.
Yeah, so I played lots of sports. It wasn't until I was maybe 11 or 12 or so that I actually got into athletics. And through high jump. I really liked high jump. And it just happens that my dad was a really good high jumper when he was at school. And so he jumped on board and he started coaching me in the weekends, and he really enjoyed taking me out. And so I started competing at competitions around the North Island.
Straight into the Frosby flop?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. No mucking around with those. Yeah, no, it was good fun. It's funny as a kid when you're that young as well, trying to learn something like the Fosbury
Yeah,
flop.
I remember.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird movement. But yeah, so that's how I got into athletics. And it was through competing in high jump that I saw pole vault, and I was like, oh, well, I want to do that one now. That one looks like fun. And again, really lucky there just happened to be a pole vault coach with a pole vault facility like 20 minutes from my house. And so it was really easy for me to start. And that was right back here when in 2011 I just started high school, and that was at the AUT Millennium, and with Jeremy McCall, who's my coach still today. So yeah, it's been a long time of such an amazing setup that's just at my doorstep.
How do you start?
How do you start pole vaulting? Well, I like to liken it, I don't even know if this is that accurate, but I like to liken it to like a kid grabbing a stick, planting it into the grass and just hopping over, right? That kind of movement of like if you're going to go across a canal, I suppose, and chuck your stick in. It's not too dissimilar, because when you start pole vaulting, you're using a pole that's not going to bend, and you're gripping it so low that you barely get off the ground, right? And so you do walking drills that are really similar to putting a stick in the ground and just stepping over it. And once you've kind of learnt how to hold on to the pole, then you might get to do 1 or 2 steps and plant it into the box. And again, you basically step onto the mats, like you're very low grip, the pole's not bending. And then once you've kind of started to work through some of those basics, you'll be able to use a pole that bends. And again, you basically grip it in the same spot. It just bends a little bit. And then you can progress the run up back. You can get on a slightly bigger pole because you've got a bit more speed. You can start going up grip, going up length in poles. So it's very progressive. Probably a lot more so than what it looks like when you just see someone hurtling down the runway with a ginormous pole, jumping really high. It's very, very progressive. You're never thrown in the deep end like that.
Yeah. How long is your pole?
Oh, it's going to sound terrible, but I only know on feet, and that's because they're manufactured in the US. But my ones that I use are 15 foot, which I think is about 4.5 metres.
Do you have your own pole?
Poles, yes. Yeah, certainly
Do you
poles
take
that
your
I
own
use.
pole?
Yeah, so they're very individualised. And
Are
that's, yeah, just because everybody has slightly different techniques, different speeds, different weights, they're different heights. All of those things determine what type of pole is going to work for you the best. And so there's almost no regulation. You can bring whatever the hell you like. And you want to bring your own because they're not supplied, and you don't want to borrow someone else's because they might not want you to. And the pole might not be right for you anyway. So, yeah, there's where I train, we've got hundreds, I think, of poles, because you need to have such a variety for all of the different people who are pole vaulting.
Yeah.
So yeah, you need your own set to take around the place.
What's it made out of?
Most of them are fiberglass. I use poles that have a bit of carbon mixed in with the fiberglass, but yeah.
You sometimes see in bloopers the pole snapping.
You do?
Yeah. Did that ever happen for you?
One time in all these years
Imagine
of pole
that would
vaulting.
really rock your confidence.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you want to get straight back on the horse. You know,
Yeah.
you don't want to get too freaked out or spooked by it. It's it's one of those interesting things. It's not that common, but at the same time, I've seen it happen quite a few times, but on different people over many years. Most of the time, people don't injure themselves that badly. The worst ones are actually hand injuries from the pole snapping. So you tend to land on the mats because you've been running really hard. You've got a lot of forward momentum, right? So you tend to land on the mats, but other things can be injured. But the one time I did it, thankfully I was injury free from it, so it doesn't have to be terrible.
15-foot pole, oversized baggage.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you get turned away, as you can probably imagine.
It's so funny, the idea of you turning up at the airport with a 15-foot pole. Oh, here she comes.
Yeah, it's actually quite comedic when we walk through the airport as well, because they're in a pole bag. My pole bag's probably almost 5 metres, maybe a bit less long.
Yeah.
And it's fairly heavy. They're probably like 25 kgs or so, and you have them on your shoulder. So it is, you're walking around with this massive lever that could knock people out all over the place, and you've got to go up escalators and around corners. And I've been through a lot of really interesting situations in airports.
It'd be a great premise for a comedy show.
Well, yeah. They just need a documentary crew to follow us.
At what point does someone say, wow, she's showing promise?
Well, I guess there are certainly heights that, like, when you reach that height, it's like, that's an international standard for being quite good, I guess. The first one, when you're first starting out, if you can jump, for women, if you can jump 3 metres in your first season or two, that's pretty good. If you get over 4 metres, then you're starting to be a bit more, you're certainly competitive at a regional level, so like, Oceanias and things like that. And then skip forward quite a bit. 5 metres is something that only 4 or 5 women, I think, ever have jumped over. So there's real standards, and the men are the same. It's essentially just a metre higher for the men. So yeah, for me, I competed at the Australian Junior Nationals, which I think is under 20-year-olds, 6 months after starting, and I won that competition, so that was the first time someone said to me, I think you should stay in the sport and keep moving forward with it.
Do you remember what your winning jump was?
No, I don't really. I want to say,
Vault?
well, either.
Yeah, okay.
I want to say like 3.5 metres.
Yeah.
Something
What's your
like
personal best now?
4.94.
Uh-huh.
Very close to that 5 metres.
Yeah. And then at some point, because obviously you have the 2020 Olympics in mind, given your age, but at some point, does someone say, hey, how about Rio?
Yeah, so essentially when I started off kind of being recognised, because I was jumping fairly high, and so I started to get into programs with Athletics New Zealand, I was in the Tokyo kind of squad, the people that they're prepping for the Tokyo Olympics, because of my age really and where I was at. But I had a massive year the year before the Rio Olympics. So even a year out, it was something that we're like, yep, there's an Olympics next year. It'd be great if we could attempt to qualify for it. And within that year, not only did I qualify, but I suddenly had such an increase in a personal best that I was within medal contention, which was just wild. It was not forecast. It was just great timing that I haven't had that breakthrough in my technique right before an Olympic Games.
What was going right?
Well, I think the fact that one of the things that happened is in 2015 I had a really tough year mentally. I had a real block. Sometimes I guess you can call it the yips, where you can't make yourself physically do something, and in pole vault that kind of manifests in running through. So you don't jump up and take off, you just run through onto the mats. And obviously when you're doing that, you can't jump over a bar, you can't compete. And I had a really tough year in 2015 where I was just in this horrible space that I couldn't get myself out of, and I couldn't jump. I couldn't jump in training, certainly couldn't jump in competition. So I spent a good chunk of that year not getting anywhere. And then suddenly I kind of managed to break out of it. Quite suddenly, I had qualified much earlier on for a World University Games Championships. And so I went despite not being able to jump, just hoping for the best. And funnily enough, when I was in the village with the other girls and training pole vault before the competition started, that competitive streak in me just came out like crazy. And suddenly I was jumping again. And at that competition, I jumped, I think, 4:45 to win the silver medal, which was quite a surprise. And after that, I was out of my hole. And because I'd had such a period of not doing anything, I think I just had this sudden kind of, now that I can vault, I was just breaking through like crazy. It was just one of those timings. Because also my age as well, I was about 18 years old. Yeah. And, I've been vaulting for long enough. My technique was improving. I'd been training that whole time. I just wasn't competing. So I think it just all happened at once because I had a year of not being able to compete very much.
Your parents must have been pretty excited as well to see this all happening, particularly given that they have well, at least your dad had a bit of a background in athletics. Yeah,
I think none of us, myself included, thought that, sport would be a career. I was in school, I was dead set on wanting to be a doctor. I didn't have any kind of intentions on carrying on sport, well, certainly not at a high level after school. But I did. And I just keep finding myself in these situations, and that was one of them. And suddenly, I'm a lot better. I'm going to an Olympics, and it just kind of happens weirdly. Even though I've been training for a long time, it all feels like it happens at once. And I'm sure for them, they're also feeling the same thing. Like, wow, better book some tickets to Rio because our daughter's going all of a sudden. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool for them. They were the ones that got me to training. Dad's the one that kind of inspired me in the first place to get into it. So yeah, I'm sure it was pretty crazy for them for it to all suddenly happen as well.
I'm talking to Eliza McCartney if you've just tuned in, and if you missed our earlier conversation, you can find it online on demand and listen to the whole thing. It's our series on New Zealand sporting history. What happened in Rio? What do you remember?
I remember a lot of things. Some of it's a bit of a blur. Yeah, I don't even know where to start. It was such an incredible experience. I was so happy to be there. Like, so happy to be there that, I just almost couldn't care less kind of how it went. It was such an experience to be a part of. And at the time I was thinking, this is just my first one. I'm hoping to have more. Like, this is an experience. This is where I learn. Not so much, this is it. I need to win a medal, So I was just ecstatic. And the qualifying round, so we for these majors we have a qualifying and a final round, and the qualifying is about usually 32 athletes, and they take it down to about 12 athletes for the final. So you need to get into the final first. That's always the hard part. And I had an awful qualifying, and I almost no-heighted, meaning I almost missed the very first height, which means that it's it. I would have been out of the competition. I would have had a no placing. It would have just been not a great way. You want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, you get 3 goes at it, do you?
You get 3 goes. And I was on my 3rd attempt. We have 1 minute when your name's called to complete your jump. And on my 3rd attempt, I ran up to the box and I suddenly pulled out, and I had to run all the way back again and start my run up. And so
you're allowed to do that?
Yeah, as long as you don't, there's a mark on the mats. As long as you don't pass that, that counts as a jump. So if you ran through onto the mats, that would count. But I pulled out and ran all the way back and then ran again and then somehow cleared it, and then off I was fine after that.
Whoa.
But my poor parents and my coach were having an awful time watching all of this. But anyway, so obviously I got through to the final, and to me that was such an achievement that I just, anything that I could have gained on top of 12th place was going to be amazing. Like, if I came 10th, I would have been absolutely blown away with how cool that would have been. And so I went into the final with the attitude of, I've got just nothing to lose here. Like, absolutely nothing. I can just give it my all. I can just enjoy it. I don't even need to, worry about how it goes, because it doesn't matter. I've already achieved so much. And because of that, I had no inhibitions. I had no pressure on myself. I was nervous, of course, but just because I was in a massive Olympic stadium and competing at an Olympic final. And because of that, I had my best competition to date, I would say. I cleared every height first attempt. And because I cleared every height first attempt, I won a medal. Because in the end, I jumped the same height as the person who came 4th, but I had a better run sheet than they did, and that's what got me the bronze medal. I don't know if I've ever done a competition since where I've jumped every height first attempt, so I think it was the fact that I could just be myself and relax, I had no pressure on me. So it was a pretty incredible situation to be in. No one was expecting me to medal. Well, not that I was aware of anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just,
Is that your career highlight so far?
It sounds a bit silly to say, but I think it will always be the career highlight because no matter what I could, imagine if I break the world record and I win another Olympics and all of those things, like that very first one was so special that I just don't know if I could top it. And I'm not saying that in a sad way. I'm sure that amazing things could happen, but there's something about that first time.
Yeah, you'll never be anywhere again where there's no expectations.
Probably, yeah. That would be it.
Okay. What now?
Well, I'm competing domestically at the moment. We've got another competition in the Hawke's Bay in a couple of weeks. Next weekend. Then we've got our nationals, some competitions in Australia, and that's our domestic season. And in that time, I'm going to be wanting to qualify for our World Championships, which is later this year. It's in August in Budapest. And to do that, there's kind of two ways, but the way that I'm looking to qualify is to jump 4.71 metres, which is the automatic standard to get you into the competition. So I'll be aiming to do 4.71 for the next few competitions.
How high does that seem right now?
Right now, in the past, 471 would have been a breeze. And I think it probably still will be once I get back. But, I haven't, I've done one competition and it was on a short run up. And at that competition, for reference, I jumped 4.36, which for that run up was really good. But that's not near 471. So it still feels unsure just because I haven't been jumping on long run ups in competition for years. So I still feel a bit nervous about it. But I think, if I'm back jumping and I'm healthy, it again should be, once again, an easy height to get. But, you can't be complacent. You have to work for it.
Having had so long off, can you feel yourself getting better faster? Or getting better fast?
It's not as fast as I expected, which is kind of something I've had to manage, an expectation I've had to manage myself. In the past, when I've had periods off from injury, when I went to compete again, I was straight back to where I was, if not better. And so I had this idea that I could just get straight back into things. And because this time I've had so long off, and on top of that, I've had a lot of, psychological stress from having years of being injured and not qualifying for things, not sure if I could compete anymore, not sure if I could be an athlete, not knowing what that meant for me or my identity and all of those things. Like there's a lot of stress that comes with that as well, obviously. So it's been really interesting this time. It's not been nearly as rapid as it used to be, and probably part of that's age as well. I mean, I'm not that old, but for the fact I've been vaulting for about 13 years, I mean, that's a long time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sports History NZ, and special thanks to Eliza McCartney for being my guest. Sports History NZ was produced by Melita Tull, Ayana Piper-Helian, Sally Ward and Sam Hollis. The podcast was put together by Justin Gregory. Tim Watkin is RNZ's executive producer of podcasts and series. And there are plenty more amazing stories just like this one from our sporting past for you to follow and listen to. You can find them at Apple Podcasts, iHeart, Spotify or wherever you found this podcast.